Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. Today I'll be talking about a game that I just recently stumbled on, which just happens to be based on one of my favorite Japanese animations. Originally released in the early 90s, Record of Lodoss War made a big impression with anime fans over the years, especially with the heavy inspiration it took from classic fantasy RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons. It had goblins, knights, elves, dwarves, and wizards, and dragons, and all the things that make for a great high fantasy story. I must have watched the series at least a dozen times and even traded in my DVD set for the Blu-ray edition over the past year. For such a popular series, you can imagine that there would be a number of RPG video games based on it, and there definitely were. Unfortunately, only a couple of those games received releases outside of Japan, the most recent being Record of Lodoss War Online, an MMO from 2016 that received some pretty hit-and-miss reviews. So it was a bit of a surprise to me when I was browsing around Steam and saw an early access game with a familiar face on the banner. There was Deedlit, the cute but skillful elven ranger who became enamored with the unlikely hero of the main series. On further inspection, I also found that this was for a Metroidvania style game, and seeing that it had been getting overwhelmingly positive reviews at the time, Record of Lodoss War, Deedlit, and Wonder Labyrinth had started making its way into my shopping cart. Now, I don't typically buy into early access, but with a full release date right around the corner and seeing so many people compare it to Castlevania's Symphony of the Night, there was just no way I could resist. And I have to say, if you do like Metroidvanias, this one does not disappoint. It has good progression, a mysterious plot, beautiful artwork and animation. This is truly a work of love. Developed by Team Ladybug, Wonder Labyrinth takes you on the journey of Deedlit, who awakens in a strange place with no memory of how she arrived there. As she makes her way through the maze, fighting the many enemies within it, she encounters her trusted party members, Parn, Slane, Ito, Gim, Woodchuck, as well as a number of other faces from the series. Many of these meetings trigger dialogue that only serves to deepen the mystery of what's happening to her. Others provide resources and minigames like Gim's Shop, Woodchuck's Dice Gambling, and King Cashew's Target Challenge. The gameplay itself is fairly basic and controls well. You run, jump, dodge, attack, and eventually unlock skills like double jump and slide. Fairly standard stuff so far. You have a primary melee weapon and a secondary bow that you can aim across 90 degrees in the direction you're facing. Not only do you use your bow to attack enemies, but you also use it to solve a variety of obstacle puzzles. In classic Metroidvania style, you'll find an assortment of new weapons as you progress through the game. Most commonly, you'll encounter these items while you explore new areas, some requiring you to keep an eye out for hidden entrances. You can also purchase weapons and items from Gim when you find one of his shop locations. Others are dropped by defeating specific enemies as long as you've reached the experience level requirements to collect it. The most discernible traits of these different weapons are their attack, speed, and damage stats, although you soon find out that certain bows have other advantages, like being able to fire multiple projectiles, dark magic arrows, or a number of other effects. Primary weapons may be a typical sword that quickly slashes directly in front of you, or a great sword that you swing overhead for a slow but powerful wide area of damage. There are also axes, lances, and even a boomerang that returns to you after you launch it. And of course, what fun would it be if you couldn't use that good old elven magic? Much like finding new weapons, you also find a variety of spells that you can add to your belt. Will-O-Wisp sends out a hail of attacks that home in on nearby enemies, while Undine rains down around your standing position, damaging any baddies in its path. Stone Blast will hover over you and slam against any enemies that get too close. You even gain an invisibility spell that basically creates a decoy image so you can dodge attacks, sneak around, and hit enemies from behind. There are a few other spells that you can get, and all of them deplete your regenerating magic gauge. These are all powerful additions to your arsenal, although you do want to be cautious because your magic-infused arrows also drain from the same power. And that brings us to the real spice of the game, and one that you will need to become very familiar with as it plays a major part in almost every aspect of the gameplay. Early on, you'll encounter two elemental spirits, Sylph and Salamander. These are basically hot swappable powers that modify your active abilities. Sylph, the wind spirit, lets you glide and hover over the ground after a jump. Salamander infuses you with fire, enabling you to walk through lava and turns normal abilities like slide into a damaging attack. Both of these powers allow you to absorb damage or pass through barriers of the like type, which is indicated by the color of whatever is about to hit you. This also drains your elemental level gauges, one for each of the two types. You replenish this power by damaging enemies and sometimes politely mincing somebody's lunch. To top it off, you can switch to a fully powered element to slowly regenerate your health. Enemies also have different strengths and weaknesses, which are indicated by a set of dice in the lower right corner of the screen. Although I never really paid much attention to that, since a little trial and error can tell you which of your elements they're weaker to. Some enemies may even take no damage from a specific element. For instance, lizardmen are resistant to fire, which they also use in their own attacks, so you'll have to hit them with wind and then quickly swap back to fire to prevent yourself from being damaged by their attacks. It's a little confusing at first if you're not familiar with that type of gameplay, but with a little practice, it's easy to get the hang of. I will say that the game does still have some balance issues when it comes to the enemies. After finding some good weapons and power-ups, I found myself shredding through monsters in new areas before they could even begin to attack me. I actually let myself get hit a few times just so I could see what they do, and it was honestly worth it because there tends to be a lot of variety in their attack mechanics. Boss encounters, of course, are much more challenging, pitting you against familiar antagonists of the series. For the most part, these fights tend to be difficult without being overly frustrating. I only came across a few that I was able to handle on the first try, so make sure not to skip any save points. Some of the boss attacks can be downright brutal. One being the dragon Nars, who tends to hit you with a series of dark magic attacks which you can't defend yourself against. This nearly impossible to dodge barrage of attacks will even stun you and leave you vulnerable to whatever hits you next. This set of attacks alone had me kicked back to my last save point numerous times before I was able to finally defeat it. Aside from that, it was a really fun game to play with an intriguing story. I really appreciate seeing a project like this being done with such a high level of quality. Especially if you're a Record of Lodoss War fan, I'd say it's well worth picking up at full price. And if you've never seen the series, I highly suggest you give it a shot. Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth is finally out of early access, and you can get it right now on Steam. That's it for this session. I hope you all enjoyed. Until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.